Hi, so I'm here with Anna Grear, and Anna Grear and I have just recorded a podcast on your podcast. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the podcast, Anna?
Yeah, sure. The podcast is called The Fatigue Files, and it's basically a podcast about all forms of fatigue, particularly long-term complex chronic fatigue conditions. But it's not just about fatigue, it's fatigue contextualized in the 21st century in the light of bigger and deeper questions. So we contextualize it sometimes in the light of thinking about the non-human, the more than human relationships within which we live. Sometimes we get quite spiritual, sometimes we get quite critical, but other times it's very practical. It'll be something on the paleo ketogenic diet, or fascia or something like that, although that particular one's a bad example because we did get a bit spiritual in that one too.
Well,
But
that's
it's
what I
a
loved about the
podcast about
few.
fatigue.
Yeah, that's what I love about the few episodes that I have listened to. That they're deep, they're very spiritual, and you're clearly very intelligent and knowledgeable, and come at it from lots of different angles. So we've just had a conversation around Kundalini awakening and how sometimes that can be linked to a chronic fatigue type healing journey. And yeah, it's been fascinating to talk to you about that. And we both share some of that kind of experience within ourselves. And yeah, perhaps you could share just a little taste of your. I mean, it's such a massive topic, so I know it's a hard thing to talk about in a short way, but a little bit about your journey with Kundalini and fatigue.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was brought up as a Catholic, and I had mystical experiences as a child, so the mystical and the spiritual wasn't alien to me. I then became a card carrying born again charismatic Christian. I've been around the block. And then in my 30th year, something 30, 31, my dad died. And after that, I was going through quite a bit of the beginnings of the chronic fatigue. And I was in a desperately unhappy marriage. And I was at the very edge of my capacity to cope with anything at all. I mean, I really thought I wasn't going to survive it at some level. And um, day by day, I would meditate, and this particular day, I had an extraordinary experience. And part of that experience was energy exploding from the base of my spine all the way up the spine and out the top of my head. Um, and just the most extraordinary energetic explosion and expansion, after which nothing was ever the same again. I mean, I literally felt that there was no skin between my nervous system and the world. So I could look in people's faces and see straight away their predominant emotional states. I could hear trees. I know it sounds crazy, but I developed all these, I suppose what we'd call them psychic abilities at that point. And it was too much. It just felt like the whole thing was crowding in on me. And I think I said to you in the podcast, eventually I had some quite frightening experiences. I went to see a priest who just said, stop meditating, get your hands in the ground, be around normal humans. And I've since realized that's probably the best possible advice he could have given me, because I think I was floating off into the realms of the extraordinary and potentially the crazy, in the sense that I was having such extreme experiences that anyone who really knew what I was going through might have thought, right, let's section her. And we know that happens to quite a lot of people who have Kundalini disturbances, that they end up institutionalized in one way or another, because
Mm.
the West simply doesn't have a paradigm for understanding this energy which exists in every single body,
Mm.
and is part of human evolution,
Mm.
according to Gopi Krishna. It's a
Mm.
powerful evolutionary force, and it's the energetic component of spiritual awakening, I would say.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I really connect with what you've shared today in the podcast and just now, and from listening to some of your previous podcasts as well. And I believe, as I've just shared in the podcast as well, that looking back on my own journey of chronic fatigue syndrome, I believe actually the whole process was linked to a Kundalini awakening and a nervous system that wasn't ready for that energy in my system, wasn't ready for that level of awareness, of expansion. And I had some deep, the Kundalini energy ultimately invited me to go on a deep, soulful healing journey and to really heal my personal trauma, and to heal ancestral trauma and a lot of things. And ultimately, it's taken me to a much better place, and ultimately a lot more balance, but the process was quite disruptive at times. And also at moments I felt like I was on a tightrope. It's like either I'm going to become more conscious and aware through this process, or I'm going to end up being sectioned or something like that. So I really felt like I walked that sort of tightrope for a little while, and it was scary. And yeah, ultimately I feel it's been a healing force. And as one of my sort of mentors, Layla Martin, sort of says, that you can actually almost worship Kundalini as a goddess, and really honor it, and actually I think not being afraid of it, and likewise not being afraid of symptoms as well, is often a key. Is moving to that more of a place of trust of what's happening. That there's a wisdom in it. There's a wisdom in Kundalini Awakening. There's a wisdom in chronic fatigue, and it's just determining what's that wisdom for me and what can I learn through this journey. So
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's so important to come home to this fundamental trust in the system itself, energetically, materially, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. The system overall, made up of the body and the various layers of consciousness that we have, is extraordinarily intelligent.
Yeah.
Absolutely extraordinary. And of course, always moving either in a direction of healing or breakdown physically. Like health is not an on or off thing. It's a direction of travel. I'm either doing things, practicing my life in ways that lead me into healthfulness, or I'm living in a way that makes that journey into ultimate health far more disruptive, painful, and broken. And I can cooperate with processes, profoundly trusting the wisdom of the body and all the intelligences at work in it. Or I can continue with my little mind and my little internalized capitalism and drivers and all the other crap that we get pushed on us from birth onwards, to try and resist it, live against it, and ultimately, as you know, many of us hit a wall eventually when we do that. Or we live lives that are actually quite unhappy without really ever doing the deep work. And the deep work takes us into such a space of completely blissful equanimity. But at the same time, we know that it's not an easy journey.
No,
right?
it's an easy journey. Yeah.
It's
I
not
remember
cheap.
someone saying to me, I can't remember what it was exactly, but something around on the spiritual path, basically about how it's not always easy, and you might have moments of almost regretting ever even starting it, because sometimes in some ways it can make life feel more challenging for a while, but ultimately it can bring you to deeper peace and deeper, more embodied happiness and connection to ourselves and the universe and each other. But to get there, that journey sometimes isn't always straightforward, and it can bring up its challenges as well.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, my sense of it is, my experience of it is, it's a homecoming.
Yeah.
We're always, it's like Ram Dass says, we're all helping each other home, right?
Yeah.
We're all guiding each other home, all on the way home together. But when you reach that point of equanimity, bliss, and inner healing, it's fantastic homecoming.
Yeah.
It's deep coming home to the self.
Yes.
In ways that are just extraordinary and utterly beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Each walking each other home. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, if you want to find more about Anna's work, check out her podcast. Do you want to, I mean, I can put links in the video below, but do you want to share where people can find your podcast?
Yeah, I lurk on the internet a bit, so they can find me at www.hypnocatalyst.com. It's a little clue. I work with hypnosis quite a bit. And the Fatigue Files podcast you can get on any podcast platform. And I have a Facebook community called the Neurocalm Community or something like that. Can't quite remember. But I'm sure people will find it.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, great to have this little conversation with you. And yeah.
Well, thanks for having me.